China is now has 30 under construction, and but with a goal of building 150 nuclear reactors between 2020 and 2035. And the total cost of the new reactors is expected to be 27 billion or 2.7 billion per reactor. So what the hell is going on?
Nuclear is a cash machine when you operate nuclear, but nuclear ruins you when you build it, when you have to maintain it, when you have to repair it, and it completely ruins you once you have to decommission it.
I think the barrier of entry to start a company is very, very low right now, which is great because it creates all these really unique perspectives of how people are trying to solve problems. On the tariff side, we're already seeing price increases in expectation of tariff increases where it's really the Wild West out there. So you could buy a chiller today that doesn't get delivered for 12 months, and there could be price increases during that 12 months, even though you have a contract signed today for a certain price.
Yeah, we are. So guys, today we're going to be discussing nuclear energy and who is winning the race, and perhaps why the US is failing. And we're going to be discussing what is going on in Germany since Trump 2.0. And we also have two guests calling in today. One to talk about solar robotics and one who can shed some light. So last week we discussed about imports of plant and equipment being a contributing factor to the GDP shrinkage in the US. And we have someone who can come in and talk to us about that today. And finally, I don't know about you guys, but I've certainly seen a lot of people at a particular event this week. And we have been hearing some interesting mixed reviews about such
You mean
event.
the military parade in Moscow or another event?
Well, maybe.
What is it? Future tech? Future?
Yes.
Should I not
But
say
yes, and we've been diving into events generally on Bricks and Bytes a little bit recently, so we can go into that.
and this is part of the reason why Dustin is
Well,
not with us.
actually, I was gonna say. So last week we had Dustin here. Do you think it was his last as well? The first and last?
Feels like, yeah.
No,
Well, he's
I
not
enjoyed
here.
last week a lot. No, I mean, we know that Dustin is doing the Lord's work today and actually rolling out software with a client.
I was speaking to another thing to raise with you guys. So this is like the second week of doing this new style of format of Bricks, Bucks, and Bytes. I was speaking to our PR department, and they told us that we need to refer to ourselves as Bucks. So the Bucks. So from now on, to their advice, I'll refer to you two as my fellow Bucks, and Dustin, of course, when he's back. How do you feel about that?
I feel great.
I'm glad
who's
you do.
Bucky?
All right, guys. Who's Bucky?
Bax is this rabbit from the fairy tale. There was a Bax like when I was a kid watching.
You mean
So-
Bugs Bunny?
I think so.
Yeah, but
Hmm.
that's with a G.
Okay, yeah. Sorry. You clearly got better education than me.
Or I just watch more cartoons than you.
Probably that's the one.
Yeah, no, mine. Bucks is the second word of the name of this podcast.
Oh
Did
yeah,
you know
I
that?
realized that one.
Okay, cool. Just checking.
But any of you a big fan of the show Band of Brothers? Have you guys ever watched that?
I don't watch anything.
Sadly not, Patrick.
In my opinion, one of the best mini-series TV shows ever released. This was a 2001 show about Easy Company in the 101st Airborne, and goes from basically basic training all the way through German, Nazi Germany capitulation and all the hardships that they had to endure. And then based on that, they had a second show, The Pacific. And then based on that, they had a third show, which I think falls off. It's called Masters of the Air. And why I mention that is because one of the pilots featured in the show who's flying I think B-17 is what they're flying, is Bucky. Who's Bucky?
So we as good as pilots.
You are.
Thank you.
Talking of which, shall we fly the ship?
Yeah.
Let's go.
Fly the plane. Maybe you shouldn't try and fly a ship. That probably explains my level of competence when it comes to piloting. Anyway, so this week we were going to dive into this topic of I guess nuclear energy to some extent. So I'm sure we've discussed similar things on Bricks, Bucks, and Bytes before, but I was reading a newsletter from Bragan that came out earlier this week, and it brought my attention to this topic of nuclear energy and how how China specifically is able to build nuclear. I don't know what the multiplier would be, but significantly cheaper than other nations around the globe, in particular the US and Europe. And I've got the reference material here, so it looks like in the last 3 projects in the US alone cost $37 billion for 2 reactors. Original estimate was $14 billion, so this cost has basically doubled and took 15 years to complete. In France, you had one which was 13.3 billion euros. Original estimate 3.3 billion euros. Construction began in 2007 and is expected to complete in 2024. Wow. And then in the UK, you have another big one. Actually, Martin, we've been there, which I'll reveal more shortly on, called Hinkley Point C, which is a rough estimated cost of $46 billion for 2 reactors. Original estimate was $18 billion.
Do you know how big these reactors are?
I think we'll get there. Construction began in 2016 and is expected to finish in 2031. So all I can see is costs doubling, tripling, timescales 15, 17, 15 or so years. Yeah, it looks like China is now has 30 under construction, but with a goal of building 150 nuclear reactors between 2020 and 2035. And the total cost of the new reactors is expected to be $27 billion or $2.7 billion per reactor.
That's cheap, right?
So what the hell is going on?
Or what's the size of those for 40 billion in the UK, for example, versus 2-point-something billion in China? Because that's the key, I think. Yeah.
No,
what's the
I do
comparison?
not have that data.
Okay.
Yeah, and a potential solution, actually, which will be an interesting one to go into after this, will be small modular reactors. So we actually had someone from Last Energy on Bit Builders with Gabe last year. So I've pulled up some notes from that episode we've done with them, which we can hopefully educate people. I've certainly educated myself since researching this and educate some of our listeners. And that seems to be I don't know if it's the solution, but certainly a solution, and the scale of which this solution makes a dent in the grand scale, I'm not sure.
I think there's like quite a few areas why the cost is skyrocketing everywhere else, and in China is much less, right? Probably efficiency, organization of the whole process, cost of materials and access to the materials, and I'm pretty sure having government as they have, it's much easier to organize permits very quickly.
And I can imagine there's not too much consideration for human rights.
Well, yes, but is it not a human right to have access to cheap energy?
Or die in the process of building them?
I don't know.
Patrick, we'll come to you in a sec, but just on this point specifically, I think that the general topic of it's been in the news recently a lot about China and the US. I think that we continuously see instances where China is I don't know if the right term is undercutting, but certainly developing technology from software, we saw with DeepSeek, and even through to their electric vehicles and so on and so forth. A fraction, is that fair either? I don't know, but definitely a cheaper cost than perhaps is done in the Western world. But then on top of that, you also have this discussion of people now reshoring their production facilities. So how is this all going to really play out? I'm not sure. But back to the nuclear energy point. Patrick, when we sent this message to you, sent me a ton of graphs, which I tried to digest.
Yeah, the confusing thing for me, okay, you're right? So you put this in the WhatsApp chat between us and Dustin. So first of all, I had ready-made reactions because, as you know, I hail from energy. And so this is something that I don't, it's not something I discovered for the first time. But what I did discover was my surprise of someone surprised about this. Like you posted this as if you had expected a different result. Did you?
No, for me, it was more eye-opening when looking at the figures and suddenly being aware. Like I said earlier, we I think we may have covered a similar topic maybe a year or so ago on this channel, but to be reminded was like quite eye-opening. And then adding that on top of all the global events that are now uncovering, it was like, oh, it feels very topical right now. So what's the scoop?
Okay, so I want to start with an anecdote before we move here to numbers and analysis. Anecdote. So a friend of mine is currently looking into opportunities to invest in Chinese startups. No, it's not my topic, but it led him to traveling to China more recently, more frequently recently. Okay, he's a European guy. It must have been the second or the third time that he had been in China. This was late last year, I want to say. And he typically does it like every 2 months now for 2 weeks. That's currently his frequency because he's really trying to immerse himself into his investment thesis. Okay. And so he shared with me after the second or third trip, yeah, so Patrick, at some point I asked the people there, and by people he means finance professionals, founders, VCs, etc. And one of them, he asked, hey guys, what is the secret why you construct so much faster than we're doing it? And he said, well, the person just smiled back at me and said, we are really good at infrastructure. And they pointed to them rolling out electric vehicle charger stations at an unprecedented level that the West is just unable to keep up with it, right? And so China in itself, yes, there's political will, and maybe that is more top-down in many ways, but there is repetition, there's demand. There's demand standardization and shaping that demand, and that extends to EV charging stations. But we can go back in history, now coming a little bit to the numbers, and earlier technologies. Take coal-fired power plants. Before nuclear even. So China has brought online just in 2023 roughly 100 new coal-fired power plants across the country.
Yeah, it's still building, right? Till 2030 or something?
I'm sure they are 100% because they absolutely, it's a power-hungry economy.
Majority will be built.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, right. And so I was speaking only about 2023. According to my numbers, they have 3,100 coal-fired power plants as of today. I didn't find the number, but I mean, you and I, we can do some educated guesses here. How many coal-fired power plants were built in the West?
None.
Since 1990?
I'm guessing none.
I don't know, a couple dozen?
Which means none in the grand scheme of things.
So you're building a massive demand pipeline. And with that, and the urgency to bring it online, and with that, you're basically telling the market, your construction companies, guys, here's repetitions. In order to make that happen, you guys have to standardize. You know, when you are not incentivized to standardize, when you're building one power plant every 20 years, nobody does that. And then when you actually spread that over different construction companies, on a construction company level, it's then maybe every 40 years, right? That's not what happened in coal-fired power plants in China. It's not what happens in EV infrastructure in China. And it's also not what happens in nuclear power plants in China. So I think we had in the link, did we have a number on how many NPPs would be built in China? Was it 100 or something?
The country has 150 between 2020 and 2035.
Yeah, that's, I mean, there's no other country that will bring online anywhere close to that number. Since 1990 in the West, it's a small double-digit number of new nuclear reactors that came online over 30 years, right? Again, this is learning curve, guys. This is where you're building the volume to tell people, hey, here's the demand planning, the demand planability, the reliable demand for you to standardize. Please standardize because otherwise we can't make it happen. And yes, we help you with the permits, et cetera, et cetera. I'm sure that also plays a role where the West is not set up constitutionally currently to actually match that. But if you don't have that volume and demand standardization in the first place, you will not have these effects. So that's where it all starts. And that's the learning curve, right? So the more repetitions you have on something, the more efficient you're going to be on quality, on time, and on cost.
So is there demand in the West world now?
Of course. There's plenty of demand.
Yeah.
About 150. I mean, okay. is there demand for a reactor in a country? Yeah, sure, but 150 guys.
So why are they doing this?
Why?
150?
Because they're not concerned about environmental issues that much, I guess, as we are. Yeah, and in the West, that's part of the reason. Also, Europe and the West, I think, was touched on the Chernobyl. I think it was
83,
issue.
85.
Yep. Yeah, so that's been probably still hanging above Europe. Why? That's part of the reason.
US almost had its Chernobyl. They just that was 3 Mile Island, also the 80s.
Yeah, so I think it just we scared that we make mistakes and we blow up some part of the earth around us. But I just wanted to add also on this efficiency, why they are more they're doing it faster, better. Actually, funny enough, I came back this morning from a site, one of my sites, where the contractor is a Chinese contractor, only Chinese employees there. Small site, maybe 9 units being built. And when you enter, everything is perfect, clean. The construction quality is brilliant. So there's not much to comment in a negative way. And also people are working all the time once you're there. There's no one staring at a phone and doing stuff on the side. This is just like the ethics of work are different than I see. So it's probably less tangible way to assess it. But to me, the ethics of work is very relevant in this case, because it just makes the work pushes the work closer toward the finish line rather than pretending that you're doing something and just spending money in the background.
And you get that a lot with other contractors?
Well, so today this project is just nothing to compare really to other jobs. Just a completely different world. Yeah, it's just funny that I just saw this today, so I can speak about efficiency and how people work. But yeah,
but I think there might be other reasons why the West is also still figuring out if it wants to again believe in building new nuclear reactors at a similar scale. Let's talk about the cost, guys. Can I share the screen here in the live session?
Yeah,
I think so.
All right, let me try that.
Be careful what you share.
Here, can you guys see it?
I can.
So what you see, that's right. These guys are good engineers and good researchers. So what you see here is the LCOE, the levelized cost of electricity. Levelized cost of electricity is pretty much the measure in order to compare the economics of different forms of power plants. You can also do it on a power plant level, but that's beyond the scope of this conversation, but different forms of power generation. And it basically think of LCOE as a very simple formula. It basically takes all the cost of a specific asset class, so construction cost, operation cost, maintenance cost, repair cost, and decommissioning cost. Don't forget decommissioning, especially for nuclear, and divides that by the overall kilowatt hours or megawatt hours produced over the lifetime of that asset, right? So that gives you the LCOE. Nuclear is on the far right.
Yeah.
So contrary to the reputation of being extremely cheap, if you take the LCOE, nuclear can compete, but it can also go to be extremely expensive. And that has to do with, hey, is this thing actually, built very well and will operate over its lifetime without defects? Or is it maybe in the end a reactor that doesn't go very well? It also has to do with the design of the reactor. Did it come online in 1960 or in 2020? Different designs, different efficiencies, different risks associated with that. So this is why the spread on nuclear here is insanely high. And you could actually double click on this and see more of a substructuring of newer designs versus older designs. And the spread would be quite different between the two. And on the far left, you actually see the renewables, right? So you see a lot of photovoltaic. Without storage, wind. What's not on here is hydro. Actually, hydro would be interesting to see as well. I mean, that's why Norway is rich for two reasons: one, gas; two, hydro. Hydro is pretty great. But see, it's a myth that you just blanket say, "Oh, nuclear is so cheap." In the chat yesterday, I shared with you guys one thing that someone else taught me. Nuclear is a cash machine when you operate nuclear, but nuclear ruins you when you build it, when you have to maintain it, when you have to repair it, and it completely ruins you once you have to decommission it. So that's where the myth of cheap nuclear comes from, is because people look at the cash-rich phase of the operation, but they choose to ignore the other parts of where nuclear actually can ruin your business.
It's a great chart, I think. But also what it shows, it is a risk profile of. Can you come back with it?
Actually? Oh yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Sorry
Risk profile of energy investments of the Western world. Where on the left-hand side, I can't see it now, but okay, on the left-hand side, you've got all of the renewables, right? Which have very low cost, but I guess, well, I'm not an energy expert at all, but I guess they are not as efficient.
They will have a lower yield in an engineering sense. So if that's what you're referring to, plus they're intermittent, right? So intermittent means you can't run 100% of your grid on intermittent renewables, or else you might get something like terrible blackouts that we have seen. So that is another constraint that you have there.
Yes,
you need to have a mix.
So they are not perfect, but on the right hand side, when you get nuclear, the risk is the cost if things go wrong, or construction costs or maintenance. But I'm pretty sure that in time, if you perfect it, then the risk of failure and construction, if you standardize it, it will be much lower on this chart.
I would agree with that. And it might actually be, we don't have that data, but if you took the 150 modern reactor designs that China plans to build, and you put that bar on this chart as the very right-hand bar, that LCOE might actually be substantially lower than the nuclear bar that we're seeing here. That's a fair assessment, in my opinion, Mark. And then there's the other thing, just to call it out. So nuclear is the perfect baseload energy. It's basically always available. You don't want to ramp it.
Yes.
Because it's terrible to ramp. But as a baseload energy, 10, 20%, 20% is fairly high. But some countries do achieve that. As a form of energy in your grid, in the mix, that's a good amount of energy. So there's that consideration too. That's fair.
Mm-hmm. What is interesting is actually like looking at the cost of energy. Throughout I think Germany is the most expensive energy costs in the whole Europe, or is it Poland?
No.
I think my Polish friends are complaining a lot, especially when they run businesses. So if the current way of supplying energy to homes, to businesses is quite expensive, and part for the reason actually why German economy was meant not to do that well, since the Ukraine and Russia situation, was the energy cost increasing. So having this in mind, is it not worth to really search and do a little bit of risk taking and try to build defensible energy kind of grid, new way of providing energy into homes and businesses? I think it's absolutely worth it.
I would say yes, but so if you look at the end consumer kilowatt hour price of electricity, people tend to think of the form of generation and not the form of transmission. So transmission makes up a substantial portion of the end consumer kilowatt hours. And so the more complex you make your design, your energy mix, and the more complex you make the grid to transport the energy, the kilowatt hour price will be extremely sensitive to those things.
So you need to have a lot of the small reactors or small production facilities so that the transportation cost, infrastructure cost is not much.
Exactly. So take it from logistics, right? So the best logistics is the one avoided. That's what logistics managers will tell you. And it's the same in energy, what energy managers will tell you. The best kilowatt hour produced is the one that you don't have to transmit. So that will substantially reduce your cost, not because the cost of generation is only substantially lower, but because the cost of transmission is avoided.
So in case of nuclear, again, I think the problem that we have that in the past and the failures of the previous reactors was that they were very big, and to tame the chain reactions which occurred after the failure, it was nearly impossible. That's why they created such a catastrophic events, right? But if you can create smaller reactors that can be tamed much easily and they don't spread in case there is a big failure, then it's also different story. So not only you are decreasing the cost of infrastructure around energy, but also you are significantly decreasing the risk of catastrophic event in case of
I'm
failure.
out of my league. I haven't properly researched the risk of fallout, spread of fallout, etc., of a small nuclear reactor failing. By the way, typically they are more modern designs, so that should be theoretical. I'm out of my.
Guys, maybe here's part of the problem. So Dustin shared this article with us yesterday about this, about Google. You probably recall it, but so people can understand here that the headline is Google agrees to fund the development of 3 new nuclear sites. And basically, they're an example of tech giants teaming up with the nuclear industry in an effort to meet the vast energy needs of data centers. But interestingly, who is building this? Who is building these nuclear power plants? A company called Elemental Power. And here is the statement from the article. Elemental Power, which was founded in 2022 as a nuclear power project developer, hasn't yet built any sites.
Well,
Does this make sense?
I think, is it not just like a SPV created to do it? That's why
based on the sentence there, that reads to me as though this is someone who is well, maybe you have a point, Martin. Maybe they're a developer and they hire a contractor in to do it. But I guess you would still need some level of expertise or experience or something to be able to do that. And to the earlier point, this is perhaps where...
so CNBC is the news provider, so...
Okay, biases in the article, perhaps.
I mean, I can't imagine that a startup would choose, because these are traditional NPPs that they are talking about here in the press release. At least that's what it sounds. I can't believe that a startup would actually take on the actual EPC, the engineering, procurement, and construction of the nuclear power plant. Also because historically you have seen 2 roles in NPP development. The developer is the operator, typically, and then they contract an EPC, and then they subcontract, etc., etc. The developer is typically the operator because you need a really, really strong balance sheet, a fortress of a balance sheet, in order to absorb the cash plus the risk. Basically, you need to put deferrals on your balance sheet to cover with the maintenance, the repairs, and the decommissioning. And nuclear is one of the very few asset classes where the risk in operation and decommissioning is as high and sometimes higher as it is in construction. Tell me other asset classes where that is the case. Probably offshore oil and gas.
Military base.
Not I want to say
not office buildings, right? Not schools, not residential, right?
No.
So here, that's why you need a fortress of a balance sheet. And so that's, for some reason, this startup seems to think that they can have that, or maybe they have an angle how that is not required. But from Google's perspective, yeah, they want someone else to take that.
But do you really know that they really want to build it, or this is just like a shell company or name of?
It's developer, so
it says developer, yeah.
Mm.
But yeah, what you're right. I mean, what the financial structure around that is, it doesn't say.
Yeah, I think someone needs to start thinking about it and doing something about it. And...
Yeah, shall we talk about SMRs, small modular reactors?
We can, but let me show you something else before, because look, I'm neither a nuclear fanboy nor am I a nuclear
What's your
naysayer.
preferred method of energy production, Patrick?
I'm just looking, I'm looking to provide a few facts here that are thought-provoking, because I'm meeting a lot of naysayers in Germany and I'm meeting a lot of fanboys in other countries, and I just wish that people, sometimes it feels like COVID days where everybody was a virologist. Guys, just look at the data, okay? So here you see a typical merit order of a country with a proper energy mix, okay? So the merit order works the following way. You cumulatively add up the megawatt of installed capacity from the left to the right in your energy mix, and from the bottom to the top, you see the incremental marginal cost of the next megawatt generated in your system. And basically what this is, you're adding the different power plants in your country, right? And so each has a capacity and each has a marginal cost for when it gets switched on. And then you map basically against the megawatt the current demand, right? So this is the demand at this moment of power generation. And so up until there, the grid operators will switch on the installed capacity, and above that they will ask everyone to switch it off, because you don't want excess in the grid as much as you can. And then That in that intersection that you see here, that is the price in the wholesale market that will get paid. Look at the facts, guys. So nuclear tends to be fairly cheap. And this, by the way, is not the LCOE, okay? Because this is all...
For those who do not recognize colors that well, is nuclear the first or the second one?
Second. You have to squint.
Oh, sorry,
I
didn't know one. The second. So it's second. Here where it sits at about 750, 10 per megawatt hour per use. Yeah. So it sits here. You know what sits here? Renewables. It's hydro, solar, wind. Right? It sits to the left, substantially lower. Mm-hmm. Now, what you can see here is this is not the LCOE because this doesn't factor in the CapEx that went into the plant. It doesn't factor in defects, maintenance, and decommissioning. Yeah. This is literally just, okay, if I now produce 1 megawatt hour, this is how much that megawatt hour will cost, which is why the merit order works slightly differently than the LCOE. Mm-hmm. But guys, what you can see is that your your entire power generation will be cheaper, both on an LCOE as well as a marginal cost basis by having renewables. You can't drive that to the max though, because then it's too intermittent and sometimes your grid will just be troubled. It's why also the rollout of grid scale power storage is so interesting for so many countries, because then you can combine the renewables and eliminate the intermittency from it. The problem with that is you have to scale the power storage to insanely high degrees to cover for peak power generation or peak demand. You can't scale it for average. So it is getting too abstract now. But I'm just saying, guys, please, can we stop just hyping nuclear? Can we please just stop hating nuclear and just look at the facts and say, okay, it has a place in the mix, but it's certainly not a silver bullet.
Yeah, but I think the point is that I think that France is the only one. Oh, no, the UK, they're building something as well in kind of Western world close to us. I'm not talking about US right now. That there is some nuclear reactors being built, right? The rest of
By the way, who's operating the UK
Shell
nuclear power plant? No, Chinese company.
Yeah, but what I was saying is that it's not about hyping or starting loving them, but there's literally, compared to other sources of energy, there is no nuclear reactors being built compared to, and I'm guessing and assuming in terms of the output power that they could produce compared to the other sources of energy. Mm-hmm. You know? So I think there's a lot of controversy around them, but in terms of, and that's the only thing that is out there. There's literally none being built.
How about space? How about solar power generated in space?
Solar power generated in space.
I'm just throwing a curveball. What's the infrastructure? Something I learned.
Just trolling by saying that?
Yeah, maybe. I'm just trying to throw a curveball in your two's direction of conversation.
I mean, yeah, to power a spaceship, I guess that's a good idea. Yeah,
these companies exist.
Solar sails are a form of propulsion, yeah. By the way, France is about 65 to 70% of its power generated comes from nuclear. And look, I mean, we didn't mention this, but it is a form of getting your country independent from someone else's fossils and combustibles. So that, I think, has always been one of the key considerations of France, is basically energy independence. Not entirely, because you still have to get the uranium or plutonium, I think uranium, from somewhere. Maybe Kazakhstan, maybe Canada, but you still have to get it from somewhere. On renewables, you need, the minerals that go into the modules. For wind, not really. For hydro, not really. But for solar, but still, that makes nuclear more attractive as an energy independence, as a source of energy independence compared to gas or coal.
So, is the West answers SMRs? Small modular reactors. Let's just go through the details quickly. So from the notes that we took from this is an interview that Gabe done with Last Energy. So SMRs are effectively modular nuclear reactors, and they're very standardized. And I think when I was doing my research on this topic specifically, one way China is able to do these things so quickly is because they have a very standardized system. Apparently the CapEx, and maybe I'm missing the context here, but typically a CapEx per modular reactor is $100 million, which allows for private financing. Mm-hmm. So I think in typically financing is not through private entities for nuclear reactors that exist within countries currently. They take around 3 months to construct on site. That is after they leave the factory. I think the overall, we didn't get the full overall manufacturing period, but construction time significantly less. And something very interesting, which they brought up, was the fact that they use steel piles instead of concrete. And accordingly, the concrete construction that goes into these modular, into nuclear power stations is or nuclear power plants, should I say, is very complicated. So this is one way that they're able to significantly speed up and reduce the complexity of nuclear.
Oh, steel pile is a prefabricated element that you just transport to the site, and then you get the rig and you put it in. So you don't need that many like wet works. Yeah,
and I guess they're a lot lighter than like a whole full-on nuclear power plant construction. Yeah.
For sure, not necessarily cheaper to produce, but
yeah. Shall we move on quickly? Patrick, can you give us? We have 10 minutes until Mike joins us. So do you want to tell us briefly about what the fuck is going on in Germany since Trump 2.0?
Sure.
And by the way, we saw a post by our new friend Jan-Hendrik Goldbeck on LinkedIn about this. And unfortunately, again, it was in German. But I'm guessing there's a little bit of a passion subject over there for the German folk at the moment.
Yeah, especially the ones that tend to live in, let's be a bit optimistic land rather than let's do what the Germans always do land. So hold on. For the visual learners here, let's do this, right? So in case you haven't followed, but actually contrary to what happens in, for example, the NASDAQ, German stocks have been on a rally. And actually German construction stocks, the few ones that there are, have performed really nicely. So for example, if you look at a specific building materials global leader coming out of Germany, you will have seen the stock double over the last year also. So interesting rally since actually Trump took office, and even since the beginning of the year when the tariff war started. And so there are actually reasons for this, but also how construction benefits from that. So what happened is in November last year, the previous government called for a snap election, basically saying, hey, we're not working out. We don't have the backing of the government anymore, of the population anymore. Let's find new elections. In February, elections happened. Then the formation of a new government was initiated. That takes usually about 8 weeks, which has concluded this week. And in the meantime, and that was extremely remarkable because it is an unconventional move, the old parliament that was still in power until the new government is formed passed a bill for 1.1 trillion spending on infrastructure and defense-related infrastructure and construction spending for 10 plus years. And so then actually the day before yesterday, the new chancellor plus administration, they took office, but they now get to actually use this spending bill. Plus it's not tied to this government. And that's important because this persists, this government. This is a 10 year in the defense fund and 12 year in the infrastructure fund.
Question
spending.
Here, Patrick, if I can. So the current debt to GDP of Germany is 60% or something like that?
Yep.
So does it mean that this 1.1 trillion for 10 years, that's around 100 billion a year, right? 100 billion a year. So that is how much is going to add to, this is very little, right? To 0.
Yeah, so two comments to that. So your math will be correct. Of course, Germany still runs a fiscal deficit. So their military spending is going to get increased to 2.5% to 3%. And that doesn't come out of these extra slush funds. So still the fiscal deficit will come on top, but it is estimated that Germany will land at around 70% of debt to GDP. I think by 2030 is what I had read. Yeah. Which it's very healthy, and that's the second comment. So I put that up here because it's the most ready to research number. But actually, if you ask an economist that knows their shit, they will sell debt to GDP is always the wrong ratio. What you actually need to take is the interest rates payments divided by the government revenue. That is the more correct way of accounting for this, but that's not easily researched, and that's why I didn't use it. Yeah, but in general, yeah, exactly, Martin, right? So you see how Germany has remarkable capacity to invest in itself, also because it hasn't invested properly in itself since about 2010. The country operated on a few years of fiscal profits, actually, similar to Norway, which you can see it here. The debt actually went down, and then the little dip you see, the little spike you see up here, that was the COVID year, the first two COVID years, and then since then again it went down. So it has that capacity. And how it's going to spend that money is about, I used today's FX rate, so about $600 billion will go into grid, pipelines, building energy upgrades, good for some companies in that space, rail, bridges, highways, tunnels, ports, also telco infrastructure, also needed in the country. Digital infrastructure explicitly is mentioned, although that term is a bit ambiguous to me. Healthcare facilities, construction and upgrades, education facilities, upgrading. And the 450 that come from the defense fund are only partially actually for equipment modernization. And included in there is the construction of ammunition and equipment factories. So for example, Rheinmetall stock is one that has benefited, I think, from this anticipating, as well as military readiness facilities. So think of large barracks and the infrastructure as such. So actually, if you're a construction tech company serving the German infrastructure and construction industry, it's going to be a good decade, but it's going to be good not just because of the spending, but because there's planning horizon, there's reliability of demand.
This increases confidence, yeah?
Yeah.
Well, what I cannot get is why international investors, everywhere I listen to, they say Europe is uninvestable.
Yes, they see it everywhere, huh?
Mostly the sources are US based. But everywhere I hear Europe is uninvestable. And it's not only from venture people, but also from like more kind of old school type of investors.
Maybe you have to check your sources. It's not what I'm hearing.
Yeah. Where are your sources from?
They are behind the scenes. There were actually trillions of
Yeah,
there were trillions of institutional capital moved to Europe from the US since January, actually. It's just that it's not making the headlines yet.
But is it not the reason for that, that the government said, hey, guys, we now are going to pull $500 billion into infrastructure. So you guys know what it means. The stocks of all the companies are going to go down, which means jump into the market now because that's the right time. Even my wife said to me a few weeks ago when she was listening to FT podcast, Financial Times podcast, that she told me that you watch that German military contractors are going to go up in the next few weeks because that's what FT said. I said, okay, let's see. And that's what happens.
Rheinmetall is on a rally since 2022 already.
But to construction, it looks like an exciting, do you say decade in the timescale for this ahead?
Yeah, I think so. And then just, I know we have to let Mike in, but just real quick, Owen, and here just to Dustin's point from last week, right? So Dustin seemed made the point of, hey, the US will have to navigate the interest rate versus inflation. The Fed decided to keep the rate stable again this week. And here to Dustin's point, the data, the Europeans have actually managed to maintain inflation near their long-term target of 2% over the last more than a year, actually. And that has given it the capacity, which is the gray line here, the third one from the top, to reduce the interest rate. And this one is actually outdated. The interest rate today, I think, is 2.65%.
Dropped in UK too.
Yeah.
While the Fed actually keeps it more between 4 to 5%. And then, that creates a slightly better investable environment too. Yeah.
Exciting times ahead.
So, yeah. And then actually the two governments, final point here, the two government secretaries for construction and for digitization and debureaucratization were very surprising picks to everyone in Germany. So one is a previous VC-backed founder, 37 years old. She doesn't come from a construction background, but everyone says she's highly competent. Hopefully, we get good impulses from that. And the other one is actually Carsten Wittberger. I don't know Carsten personally, but I know many people who have worked with him and for him. Typically people tell me they're excited. For him, this is going to be a new job. He has never been in politics. He has his entire life been executive. Telstra in Australia, T-Mobile in Germany, E.ON, and previously was a partner at BCG. So he comes certainly also with a business mindset and no politics mindset because he's not trained in politics. So people are excited about these two picks. Expectations are also high. That's not always good.
Mm-hmm. We have a Mike in the room. Thanks for sharing, Patrick. Mike, what's going on?
Hey, Mike.
Hello.
What's up, everybody?
Hey, Patrick, do you feel like the odd one out now?
Oh, because Mike has the jacket, you mean?
Yeah.
Well done.
Yeah.
Thanks for excluding me
You're
here.
not conforming.
And by the way, I will say that Mike was the one who WhatsApped me and said, "Should I wear a jacket?" So it's cottoning on.
80 degrees Fahrenheit here, which is what, 26, 27 C's, and I had to carry this jacket around Charleston all day.
But you have aircon, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I've just seen something
man,
in
your
Mike's
whiteboard, I
background.
mean-
Yeah, is that on purpose?
Oh no, it's product strategy session. It's very simple.
Is that the
How not to
operating
pay for
manual
ads.
of BuildVision? For people that are probably just listening to this, Mike's whiteboard says BuildVision plus AI equals world domination.
It's very simple. It's a very simple marketing pitch.
Hey Mike, I'm curious what you think about people needing to own workflows when it comes to the world of AI.
Yeah. I know we've talked about this in our super secret chat WhatsApp group, but construction is a very unique snowflake where each project is a combination of different parties, right? Every project's unique. There's 6, 7, 8 different people or companies that are involved in every project, and it's never repeated. So what that causes is it's a very, very hard process to create any value with an LLM because there's no standardized data. And what that leans into is if in construction, you're not owning a workflow between external parties. So hey, I'm looking for a bid from a subcontractor or being a source of truth or a record of truth. I don't think AI is helpful for you. Building a unique point solution that pulls down document information and creates an output is very, very hard if you don't own the data below it. So unless you're replacing a Procore and Autodesk or creating a new unique workflow between parties, I think those AI companies are going to go to zero, and it's going to be interesting to see how this play out. And one position we've taken at BuildVision is we're going out to companies that hey, maybe have raised a little bit of venture capital. And they aren't seeing the growth projections that they're looking for. BuildVision's hiring. Come join a team that we're going to hyperscale.
Yes. Right.
That's the position we're taking. And again, it's a challenging space, but there's a lot of opportunity to actually provide real outcomes to customers. And I think I said this on the last podcast, but I talked to another CEO that's hey, if I had the return on investment that every software promised me, I wouldn't have to build buildings. So you need to create unique ways to provide value. So our go-to-market, I told you this before, is if we don't make you money as a customer using BuildVision on the buy side, we don't take any money from you. So let's go scale that way.
Guys, I have never done this before, but how can we do a clapping? Can you hear it from Mike's entry? Here we go.
There we go.
Who wants to respond?
On this comment that these companies are going to zero, reason is that they don't own the workflow, which means that they can be easily cloned, and they are just literally a commodity so everyone can build them, and they are just competing on price.
Yeah, I think the barrier of entry to start a company is very, very low right now, which is great because it creates all these really unique perspectives of how people are trying to solve problems. But for example, we're using ChatGPT throughout our entire process. We are using Claude throughout that entire process, and we can roll out really powerful things to our customer that just gives it to them at no cost, as long as we own the workflow. So right now we're hey, they give us access to their project documents, and we give them a 7-page detailed report of an engineered, reviewed documentation of their mechanical electrical equipment with one click. We charge for that? No, because we want to get them into the application and facilitate the transaction, which is where we consider there's real value, creating that outcome.
Mike, how much does it cost to do this for you, roughly, using these tools?
It's $20 a month for ChatGPT Pro.
Okay,
three people, $60 a month, 3 people using it. We spent, I think, $1.40 last month with Google Gemini Pro. Processed 450 commercial construction projects. So that's, specs, drawings. So it's very interesting, right? And they're all right, how do we take that structured data and then provide value back to the customer? And that's our go-to-market strategy around that.
Patrick, any hot takes?
Actually, Mike, I'm you and I, we chatted about the working capital in the construction industry. Can we go there? I know it takes us away from the AI a little bit, but I think you and I were equally fascinated by that.
Yeah.
I'll set you up, Mike, and then perhaps you can double down on the observation. So you and I were chatting about, hey, why is it that invoice goes from developer to general contractor to sub 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, from the sub maybe to material supplier or to some other temp labor agency. And so that you have this whole chain of invoices. And I think when you run a business in this industry, you realize it. But when you're not from this industry, let me just point this out. Every invoice is actually an AR and an AP.
Yeah.
So you're actually multiplying and amplifying the amount of accounts receivable by just separating it that way. And so you were observing, and I'll set you up here, hey, I mean, can't we just basically facilitate the invoice, the AR, the AP from the owner/developer to everyone in the chain and eliminate all the ARs and APs in the mean?
By the Mike, also, I would say, hopefully I'm not stealing your point here, but every time that goes through an AR and AP process, some form of a markup gets added.
Yeah. I mean, the position that I took, I want someone to prove me wrong, but I think every level that you move up, you're saving 50 bips of interest. So from capital provider to owner to GC to sub to supplier to manufacturer rep up to manufacturer, 7-8 steps, 4%.
On $13 trillion.
Again, I want to, and I know
how much of that is fluff, huh? Yeah.
I don't think anyone knows. Like, the story we've gone to market with is like, hey, a piece of equipment comes off the line for $1 million, like a generator from a manufacturer, and the owner ends up paying 1.7 because of fees and markups during that chain. But on top of that, there's an insurance and capital premium that no one really talks about. Look at the auto industry. Mercedes-Benz can get better capital rates from their banking entities because they're going directly to the OEM and saying, hey, we're going to go buy 50 motors this year. And I know that cash flow is coming through because here's X, Y, and Z. Look at the large developers. We talked to a developer that has 10,000 residential apartments. And, their capital motion is like, hey, we're going to go install X amount of capital annually. Why am I paying a markup on each individual project to release one air conditioning unit for that apartment building when in theory, I can go directly to that OEM and say, hey, I'm going to go buy 1,000 units a year for the next 10 years. What's the best rate? I'll guarantee you the supply. We're seeing this on the data center market already where Google and Amazon goes to a Kohler generator manufacturer and says, hey, we're going to buy 18 months of capacity. It just helps everybody. And then that downstream effect, like that OEM also has their entire supply chain. You go to an OEM, like they're putting pieces together from other manufacturers. So think about that velocity of capital. And if a capital provider can, again, see value and validation through an application to say, hey, this piece of equipment for this project has been released for fabrication. And with that PAYAP releases 50% of the capital, but that capital goes directly to OEM, doesn't go down the chain and up the chain. Again, that's only improving efficiency in the space. That's not taking a cut from anybody. That's just like, hey, capital is now more streamlined. So that's where we're at this like risk on perspective of BuildVision will absorb as much of that risk as possible until it doesn't make sense because we think there's value on the upside.
It's Mike, you've actually tied the first two topics that we discussed today in a beautiful way. So what you have just described to us, right, to me is, okay, if I standardize demand and I aggregate demand to such a ridiculously large degree that I can give everyone stability, consistency, planability, reliability of pipeline of the next whatever, 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, then all of a sudden people will give me that margin. They will give me that latitude to also change the usual process a little bit. 2 anecdotes to this. And perhaps one estimated data point. So the first one is, I'm good friends with a business owner of a very well-known GC. When you read the name, you will say, yep, I know them, right? And so they are actually very good at standardizing, blah, blah, blah. And yet his business is unable to go to contractors and say, I want to do the procurement for you, the way you just described it. And this is one of the very, very best ones that actually standardize. Why? Because they are still not in the league where they can say, you know what, I'm going to move 100 billion of construction volume. You have to do that with me. Mercedes can, right? There's a lot of if I sign up for the next E-Class platform as a supplier, I know, okay, that's probably 8 to 10 years of full utilization of my factory. So it's okay that I let Mercedes make that procurement. In construction development, data centers, we have the same thing, right? So they have that kind of velocity and planability. I really like that. And the other anecdote that someone that used to be a contractor, I can't confirm, but I imagine it's correct, said, Patrick, when the interest rate is not ZERP, contractors like the negative working capital of being paid up front and then basically paid if paid and delaying, because they earn some interest rate margin that they don't have to factor into the. I don't know if you encountered that, Mike, but that's another thing that I was like, oh my God.
Guys, think about like a normal general contractor at scale. Let's say their average fee is 1% to 2% rolling. But hey, I install I output $1 of commercial construction. I'm only capturing 1% to 2% of that. Like, why can't they capture more? And they can capture more by leveraging their buying power, providing better capital flows. And like, to tie back to that whole point, it's like, we're like, there are like, if we go back to this idea that every project is a unique snowflake and there's different pieces and different parts, there are pieces that are consistent. Like a split system air conditioning unit, there's 7 manufacturers in the world that make that will sell in the United States. It's still an engineered output. Like, I need X amount of chill or X amount of heat or X amount of power. So you can streamline those, create capacity buying, and then provide value along that chain and actually pull out those pieces in the supply chain. That's what you're seeing in the data center market right now, Patrick, is like, hey, 50% of the cost of this building is the generator and chiller package. I'm going to go install $75 billion worth of commercial construction or data center build out next year.
That's it.
Is it not the case in data center? That is, data center is very simple. It's not simple, but it's very it's kind of like one-sided building in terms of it's not a hospital, right? It's not catered to particular need. The need is just standard, for all of those. It's not residential, tower, 27 stories, 35 stories, or more spread out residential complex. And I think the question is like, what's the percentage of construction or construction volume for those standardized components that is available to construct?
$250 billion of mechanical electrical equipment are bought annually in the United States.
But that's overall, right? That's not.
It's overall.
It's overall.
So then you're tranching it down to where are the complicated systems that have long lead times and high cost. We're targeting 100 billion of that is large systems, and that's the initial wedge of like your building capacity and the application to do that. To go back to your point, Martin, of like, hey, like, what does it actually look like at scale? It's like you can go to an OEM like Trane, who's a publicly traded company, and say like, hey, we're going to go issue $100 million of purchase orders to you a month. For them, that's interesting, right? That's value creation, and they're interested in that. If you're saying, oh, I have one project and I'm going to go buy 100K of HVAC systems, they really don't care. They have a whole sales team and process around that. But we're going in and saying, hey, we'll be a facilitator of $100 million of buys. We'll be the one throat to choke, and we'll reduce that credit risk like we talked about, and helps them demand plan, to help them do all these different pieces, and it reduces their actual upfront capital cost. Because what a challenge that we're seeing in the data center market right now holistically is like, a data center builder will go to an OEM, but like, I want to buy 18 months of capacity from you. And that OEM says like, all right, do I build a new factory to sustain that? And they're like, well, what happens after the 18 months? Do I go lay off my sales team because I don't have to go sell anything for 18 months? And it's a hard pitch to go do. So by trying to create standardized demand, like Patrick said, like with Mercedes, like, hey, we have 8 years of the E-Class. How do we do that in market? How do we go say like, hey, it could be data centers, it could be hospitals, it could be residential. We're expecting this much demand in market. And how do you streamline that? And there's no other way to aggregate that right now.
I got one more pushback on this, actually.
You got one more question, my friend.
What's that?
You have one more question.
Okay. The part of the reason why it's not so easy is that when we think about it 6 years ago or 5 years ago, maybe 7 years ago as well, there was boom for residential everywhere throughout the world, right? There was huge boom. Now we have data center booms. How can you standardize the demand for particular components if the components for each category of the buildings are different? That's probably part of the reason why it's not so easy to do so. When we're talking about the cars, it's a slightly different story. Yeah.
So Yeah, the point there I'll make is like you're verticalizing the supply chain on the pieces that are standardized in a sense. A OEM like Trane or Carrier or Daikin or JCI, those are like the 4 big mechanical equipment manufacturers. They're making a range of outputs. You go to their website, you can go buy a rooftop unit that's between 100 and 1,000 tons. That's an output of coolant or cooling for a building. It doesn't matter if it's a data center, hospital, or a space station on the moon, right? It's physics, and we're tying to those engineered physics results of like pushing electrons or like pulling heat out of a system or pushing heat into a system. And that's what you're structuring around. And they're the same OEMs on the other side. So the outcome building really doesn't matter. You're building a box for this engineered system that's needed, and then the building can be built around that as needed.
Patrick, any last one from you? Well, we have Mike.
I forgot my fun number. Mike, you and I had fun with this number. So we estimated, this is going to be wrong, but maybe directionally correct, 860 billion of working capital at any given day in the global construction industry. So that we can eliminate. What's that?
Opportunity?
Yeah.
Why is
Build
no one
vision,
capturing
baby.
it then?
Well, if
we might have
to Mike's point, if you're the standardizer and aggregator of that standardized demand over a long time frame, that's a lever.
Yeah, I'm a little bit skeptical on this because what's the standardized demand really? I can agree that to Mike's point that for certain components, yes, but is it really that standardized? When in 2, 3, 5 years time there's new technology or improved technology when it's no longer standardized because there's new stuff out there. So
there's not for chillers. There's not for rooftop units. There's not for generators. Again, you can add little things. All right, I know. I'm getting kicked off. But
what? No, one last thing. You're not getting kicked off. You're not getting kicked off yet. Have you seen? We discussed last week about people potentially stockpiling materials, equipment, and so on and so forth. Have you seen anything, Mike, with the tariffs?
So on the tariff side, we're already seeing price increases in expectation of tariff increases, where it's really the Wild West out there. A lot of contractual agreements that OEMs have with suppliers and subcontractors allow for increases in prices associated with tariffs up until delivery. So you could buy a chiller today that doesn't get delivered for 12 months, and there could be price increases during that 12 months, even though you have a contract signed today for a certain price. Don't know how it's going to play out. It'll be very, very interesting to see. But different customers and just different sellers are handling these situations differently by absorbing tariffs, things like that.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And that's a killer of construction activity. I hope they get that under control. That is silly.
Yep.
Shall we do it again? Mike, thank you for coming.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Mike.
Great stint. You started something now. We're going to make sure everyone comes with like a contrarian statement on the behind them.
I love it. Have a great day, guys. We'll talk soon.
Cheers, Mike.
Cheers, Mike. Interesting.
Yeah, that was awesome.
He's like he come in like shoot the shit.
Patrick, are you really thinking this 800 billion can be streamlined somehow through someone's hands so that I just don't know. I think it's
partially.
Partially.
Yeah,
and what's the part? I think if we're talking about very standardized components, yes, but
well, if you just take 1% of a market share, then it's fine.
Yeah. I do think that what we just discussed is the correct lever. So you do have to aggregate, standardize the demand so much that it's, think of it like infra market, right? I mean, you guys are very familiar with that. But so why do manufacturers prefer to work with infra market rather than another customer?
Because they have provided them the demand.
Exactly. And that in a plannable and reliable way gets my utilization up, and I trade higher certainty of utilization and thus better leverage on my fixed costs versus, okay, here I give up 1% of margin on a per unit basis. That's a great trade, right? And so if you think of the bottlers that work for Coca-Cola, it's the same thing, right? So the bottlers that work for Coca-Cola, they give up their freedom to work for another brand, and Coca-Cola, I imagine, asks for its pound of flesh from these bottlers, but in return, hey, you know what, my factory is gonna be utilized, right? And so if you can build something like that in portions of construction, and I think Mike's example with Microsoft offering contracts for data centers, 75 billion next year, let's say that is still going to be the case next year, that is very attractive, right? If you can grab that, and then if you can believe that happens for 5 or 10 years, that's very good. And so in that slice, you can then do that. But if you build one apartment building next year, you build, I mean, Martin, even if you do it for, I don't know, 5,000 units next year, that's just not the same scale.
Yes, I agree. So the thing is,
Guys, we got James in the room. We'll continue this after James. Yeah? Hey, James.
Sorry, Martin, you just got cut off.
Hey, James.
Hey, guys. How's it going?
Hey, James.
Good, you? Hey, Patrick, do you feel the odd one out even more now?
Yeah, James is also in a smart jacket. Yeah, I'm sorry about that, guys.
By the way, James, we just had Mike Powers from BuildVision on, and you both coincidentally have whiteboards in your backgrounds. However, Mike had a funny statement on his, so
yeah, the marketing message.
Yeah, we should have preempted you on that. I'm sorry we let you down.
I had to delete all the differential equations we had over here to hide some of the secret sauce. Next time, I'll get you a good message, though.
Yeah, our hundreds, thousands of listeners, you probably could have ended up in a little bit of a sticky situation there. Hey, so James, so you guys are just building off the back of a fundraise recently. So could you tell us a little bit about that $4 million pre-seed?
Yeah. So Cosmic Robotics, we build what we call intelligent tools to help accelerate the construction of critical infrastructure. Yeah, we just announced a $4 million fundraise, and that's actually to build our first product, which we're calling the Cosmic 1A, which installs solar panels on utility scale solar farms out in the field.
Cool. Could you talk to us a little bit about your thinking behind like go to market with these kind of solutions? Like how do you deploy your robotics? Who is your customer, and how do you get into their DMs?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I guess like a little bit of background. Prior to starting Cosmic around 2 years ago, I was an early employee at Built Robotics, so an early construction automation company doing autonomous bulldozers and excavators and all sorts of stuff there. And then I spent some time at Autodesk in their robotics research group doing adaptive robotics, so using the latest AI models and perception to actually have these robots do intelligent things in unstructured and semi-structured environments. And so it's like along those lines where I started to develop this kind of thesis of how to get more robots in the field and chat with folks. And I guess like sliding into the DMs there, the Built Robotics and Autodesk credential, I think really helps. So I knew a lot of folks there, and that actually opened a lot of doors for us, which was really helpful. But actually spending a lot of time in the field and working with folks, we started to put together this thesis of, how do you actually get more robots and new tools into construction? And they sound kind of obvious, but I think not a lot of folks actually follow through with all three, which is one, got to be solving a real problem in the field with immediate ROI, not building tech for tech's sake or building something that people don't actually need. And then solving a problem that is repeatable, structured, and really well defined. So it's something that actually starts to look a little bit like manufacturing, right? High volume, repetitive, somewhat standardized parts, but don't necessarily go so far as to build a factory on site or try to go full modular. It's finding a task that already exists that has those characteristics in it. And then the last one, kind of following off that, don't build the factory or reinvent the wheel, is have whatever we build be a drop-in replacement for existing processes. And so really understanding how things work in the field today, and then whatever tool that we make needs to, reduce the disruption and friction to adoption to actually get it to be used by crews out in the field.
Mm-hmm. Hey, James, so the robot is installing the panels, or is also installing this substructure for the panels? And also, I guess there's some wiring around that. Does it also do the wiring and the complete installation? What's the scope here?
Yeah. So that's the other part of it, is finding like that really well-defined scope for something that we can build and deploy immediately, and then kind of iterate to a wider scope. So yeah, for those that are unfamiliar, kind of on these really large utility scale solar sites, a lot of the panels, there could be a couple 100,000 or millions of panels installed. Here in the Central Valley in California, it's kind of out in the desert, can reach temperatures of up to 100 degrees. And so it's really backbreaking work kind of out in remote spots. And so if you're going to build a solar farm, developer finds a piece of land, usually has some power purchase agreements, things like that. You go level the earth, you install piles into the ground, then the substructures the panels get installed on. Once the panels are, these 90-pound solar panels actually lifted up and placed onto the racking, as it's called, then there's fastening, electrical hookups, and all of that. And to start, we're just doing the heavy lift task of picking up those 90-pound panels and placing them onto the racking. And right now that takes a crew of like 5 people. It's 2 or 3 people to lift these things overhead, 1 to kind of help catch it, and then someone else doing the fastening. And so with our tool, can really be a force amplifier where you don't need those 2 or 3 folks doing the repetitive stress injury inducing motion lifting overhead, and just does the heavy lifting. And then you still have someone doing the fastening and wiring. And then over time, as the tools get better, we can start to take on a larger scope of work.
Okay.
James, does it end with solar with you guys? Have you thought about my very long-term plan? Is there opportunity for you to get involved in perhaps lifting? I mean, you just mentioned that how many people is required to lift, and we certainly see, for example, glazing there's always cranes and various manpower involved and whatnot to get into a site. So could it be that you guys also expand from just solar into other areas?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think what we think of as the core of what we're building is that kind of adaptive robotics, where in a unstructured or semi-structured environment, you actually have a tool with a manipulator that can move things around its environment. So the solar task is a great first one. It's like pretty structured, pretty much standardized parts, highly repeatable, and then over time, if you squint, a lot of things in construction are pick something up and place it somewhere else, somewhat intelligently. And so as we go further along that adaptive piece, we can then go into other verticals as well.
Mm-hmm. How do you view a competition from all around the world in terms of like robotics? For example, well, I actually don't know how friends in China are doing it, if they're using robotics at all, but I think they are the largest manufacturer of solar panels. So I would guess they would think about also how to install them in an automated way. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think where we are, we just cannot deploy solar fast enough. It's the fastest growing new energy to the grid, and obviously electricity demand is exploding. So I think it's kind of all hands on deck from a societal level to actually be able to deploy more units out into the field and get it done. So on that point, I think it's great that there are a number of other folks kind of looking at similar things to us, and that's great. And China's an interesting one. I've seen a few demos coming out of there. I think on the more traditional manufacturing side, it's pretty impressive. I was talking to someone the other day. They visited a factory where they were manufacturing 3 gigawatts worth of solar panels in this massive factory with only 6 employees. So it's true lights out manufacturing at scale. And we'll see if that translates into the field for them. But it's an exciting time.
Yeah. Patrick, anything from you? Yeah, go.
James, we're so the last 4 years have been lights out also for the grid scale solar industry in the US, rooftop here in Germany as well, but like grid scale, you guys have set the pace. And I think, what was it called? The BIL, Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, probably had a good amount to do with that. This year feels a little bit like a new era. How are you projecting solar demand in the US given all the shenanigans, ambiguity, uncertainty that were being offered?
Maybe a question to it as well. Was it previously like founded by the government over there in the US? And now it's not?
Funded, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think like any new technology, solar had some help from the government via, the Inflation Reduction Act and even previous piece of legislation to help get it going. But now it's just the most economical new form of energy to the grid, regardless of subsidies, and also the fastest to build and deploy. And part of that is its kind of modular nature, which makes it really great for automation, where kind of learnings across different projects, EPCs and GCs can use to then, go build those projects. So from our standpoint and our customers, the next 2 or 3 years, everything is booked. We're still going flat out. There's going to be growth there. And then I think, it's hard to predict what happens in the next 2 months in the current climate, let alone the next 2 or 3 years. So we're not too worried about it.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's a healthy business attitude. And you're right. I mean, solar, especially on a grid scale, but even rooftop over here, we're way past grid parity. So the economics speak for itself, but that's assuming certain costs also on the cell and module level. So I hope those don't move too much against us here the next years.
Yeah, definitely.
Cool. Guys, anything else for Arman? You look like you're frantically thinking about something.
Me?
Yeah.
No. Oh, maybe this is an interesting question. What's your revenue model? Like how are you going to make money? What's the what's the business model here?
Yeah.
Sell the robots or lease the robots?
Yeah, so initially leasing the robots. So we train our customers operators. It takes one person to operate the robot, kind of they're the spotter, overseer. They can also do that fastening task. And so initially we're leasing robots to folks. Again, that like decreases friction to adoption because they don't need to outlay some CapEx expense for the system. They can lease it for a year, try it out, see how they like it. And then over time, a lot of our customers like to own their equipment. And so we'll do a lease to own model where we sell the equipment outright and then can have some maintenance and software licenses on top.
Mm-hmm. What do you think, if you can share, would be the cost of the robot installing the solar panels?
Yeah, it depends on a per kind of project basis right now. So to get the system in the hands of folks as quickly as possible, and it's actually a really expensive task right now because you have so many people doing it, that we just guarantee our customers know their costs, and so we guarantee them a flat percentage of cost savings with leasing the equipment. And then over time, we'll develop a slightly more sophisticated cost model. But yeah, it's kind of in the range of a couple tens of thousands of dollars per month.
James, I have one last question. So how did you learn? I'll ask you, I'll tell you why I asked this specific question, but how did you learn to be a robotics engineer?
That is a good question. Well, actually, maybe going like way back, I have a family background in construction. So my grandfather was a contractor, building inspector. I grew up on his projects in his workshop and figured I was going to do construction as I got older. Then learned what an engineer was. It's like, oh, they build things, I'm going to go do that. Studied mechanical engineering. And so mechanical engineering, I think, is a lot of the glue that holds like robotics engineering together, where you need to have the hardware systems, mechanics, and then software engineering, electrical, all of that on top. Studied mechanical engineering, bachelor and master's, and then it's really just go out and build some stuff, blow some things up, and it's the only true way to know how to build robots.
Expensive hobby. I'll tell you the reason I asked the question. There's a robotics company that we know very well, and one of the founders, when we first asked them, how did you learn to become a roboticist or a robotics engineer, they said just went on YouTube and watched some videos. It's like, wow.
Incredible.
Mind blowing. Power of YouTube these days.
Yeah, I feel like the next generation, it's going to be, you just ask ChatGPT or something. But a lot out there.
Yeah. Guys, do you have anything else for James, or shall we release him to do his
I think it's
CEO
awesome
duties?
what you're doing, James. Keep it up, man. We really need as much labor capacity in the West as we can. So you're definitely helping us a lot.
Yeah, appreciate that. I think it's all hands on deck to build some infrastructure and do things in the physical world.
Okay, let's do our Edu. Is that how you say it? Edu, ADIEU. Do you know what I mean? Have I just totally made that up?
The claps.
Okay, here we go.
There we go.
Cool. Thank you, James. We'll end that there.
Thanks
for
guys.
coming, and good luck. Take care.
Bye.
Good luck.
Take care.
Interesting, huh?
Yeah, it is. It is interesting. All the robotics are interesting. The question is, can they go slightly deeper and do not only the lifting, which is obviously the first point, but also maybe to connect all the installations as well. Ideal scenario is you send 20 tracks to the field, 100 kilometers away. Well, not 100 kilometers away, because then Patrick will say that the infrastructure cost of delivery of the energy is expensive. So it needs to be, but you send 10 tracks.
Yes, that is exactly what I will say, Martin.
You send out 10 tracks out, and then there's robots coming out of the track and then slowly taking materials out, laying the foundations, putting the solar panels on, and then connecting all of it.
I mean, I have hope. When you speak to founders like James and
Salar for sure as well. He laid out this
force of nature. When you speak of these to these founders, you gain the sense that there's hope for us after all, and there's reasons to be optimistic. And I actually think still too many people, I think actually less so on the customer side than on the investor side, on both sides, but more on the investor side, are still attributing robotics to that
humanoid
slow. That also, but to that slow development, high capex, slow customer adoption kind of experience that perhaps a lot of them made the last 15 years. I think in the blink of an eye, it's rapidly changing right now, the adoption of it as well as the economics of it. And so I dedicate a lot of my time together with Gabe on our team to that. I can see it, and I see customers realizing that too.
That is what it's cheaper. It's not that expensive.
You can make it expensive, but you can also design it differently. That's my trouble with automation engineers going into robotics. They typically don't have the mindset that I like. Exceptions exist. I like software people and product people going into robotics because they design the cheapest, most componentized, most modular systems, and that in the end kills your economics.
Yeah.
So in a good way, sorry, it basically kills the cost.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look at some of the systems that I have found interesting, entire robotic system, bill of materials, 25,000.
Yes. I think that's the engineer's role to overspec, oversize, make sure that like a general concept of engineer, but the greatest ones, these ones with a commercial attitude would just do bare minimum to make it work, but they see the other side, the commercial side of it.
Yeah. Who was the originator of the quote? Was it Einstein? Perfection is not achieved when you can't add anything anymore. Perfection is when you can't leave anything out.
That wasn't me. I'm not sure.
Yeah, that was you. Yep.
From a true engineer. Guys, we're very much on schedule, which is surprising actually, considering this is the first time we had some people call in. So with that, shall we go on to, well, timely as well, because I was on James's LinkedIn profile as we were chatting to him, and I saw the event that we alluded to at the very beginning of this episode, which I know a few of our friends are currently, or should I say fellow bucks, don't want to get told off by the PR team again, are currently, what's the word, indulging themselves at. So in should I say. And interestingly, we done a podcast yesterday, and we heard some similar things about events generally in construction, whereby they are things that you as a founder have to be at. However, are not enjoyable experiences, are very can be very expensive and resource heavy. You have to bring a significant team there, and you have to invest in your stand and so on and so forth that you do around there. And I'm very curious to hear one, perhaps your views on events, and two, we will then go into a few comments from some of the people within the Bucks chat to see what to. So I haven't properly read through these, but we will see what the general gist is around events. And by the way, I'm not saying anything necessarily negative. Like, they're great places, and everyone we speak to in the go-to-market space says that they're essential to sales within construction. So it has to be part of your strategy. However, the same people that say that are the ones that moan to the rafters about them.
I think I can start. I think that from startups' point of view, they're absolutely crucial, because how else can you show yourself, show what you do and how you do it to the customers, to put yourself out there. On the other side, if you're not a startup person, that might be sometimes disappointing what you are like seeing on the stage, or subjects that are being presented. Kind of so that's my side of it. But from startups point of view, I think, I don't know what's the better way to speak to people.
Shake hands.
Yeah,
people,
because you can hate events as much as you want, but everyone, no, not everyone, but Dustin is a great example now why he was where he was. Great founder, great startup at the event. So there is a need for those.
Patrick is twitching.
I don't have event experience.
Why you don't have event? Why you don't have event experience? Okay, you've not been to any. Okay.
Never became a priority for me. No.
That's not how.
What was the event that was happening this week that we're referencing? Is that the ENR thing?
Future Tech?
No, ENR Future Tech. Yeah. I think everyone is there. Sounds like they're having a great time whilst we are recording Bricks, Bucks, and Bytes.
I'll give you an example. So I don't think we ever shared this outside of Fundamental, but it's interesting. So I have a philosophy to go to 2 events per year, and one is our internal team retreat, or whatever fancy name. But actually, what's interesting is what we don't do. So what we do is we book a hotel for 6 nights, 5.5 days. And you know what we don't do? We don't do any program. We don't invite people. We don't do any speakers. Is the German tax office listening? Probably not. We don't do any agenda. Like literally, guys, I'm not kidding you. There's no agenda, nothing. We literally just tell everyone, hey, hop in the cab. Let's meet there. And the whole point is just to spend time with each other, but do the same things we would typically do, just in a different environment, different atmosphere, create room for casual chats, etc. So that part of the event experience, once in a while, I absolutely subscribe to.
Are you working there or not?
Yeah, we're working. It's literally like the guidance to the entire team is we do the exact same thing we're usually doing, just in a different place.
Mm-hmm.
So that part I subscribe to, but every once in a while, that is important here.
Yeah.
And I don't subscribe to, hey, can we please invite that person and give them whatever, this stage in order to say something. And by the way, I'm going to sell tickets.
But that's exhausting.
That for me is difficult.
That's exhausting to participate in, right?
But it's not a case of that these event organizers have to make money.
But also,
many do though, right?
Also, if you're organizing an event and you've got two-day event, right? You've got the stage that needs to be filled from 9 a.m. till 5 p.m. Okay, how good how do you call it, cast, or how good the cast can be to fill?
They can't.
You can have 1-2 great people, maybe. The rest is just needs to fill the spots. So that's my part of beef.
What's better than have an empty stage?
No.
Maybe in some instances.
Speaking from my vantage point of view, that's the pain. However, from the startups point of view, I think it's a great opportunity to talk to people and shake hands.
My gripe is this really pissed me off once. I was in an event here. There's actually a very big one in London called Digital Construction Week, which will be happening in the next month or so. The primary reason I go is to see.
We will send you a ticket, Patrick.
Yes. The primary reason.
Ollie. By the way, Ollie made a fantastic business out of it and sold it. And I think, the fact that he pulled that off, amazing, right? So from a business perspective, I completely get it.
Yeah. So it's a great place to catch up with people and see a large quantity of people in a short time. However, some of the talks you go to, the title does not correlate to what you see. So they'll make this bold promise that when you go and see this event, you'll learn something revolutionary, and then it just ends up being a sales pitch, and you're like, that's just.
Yes.
That's not.
Yeah, but that's the way Western marketing works: over promise, under deliver, very often.
To the point, though. If you are a startup at an event, then perhaps you should have a little bit of a strategy before you go there, and not just.
I think if it's an industry trade fair, the way trade fairs used to be, I get your point, Owen. Yeah, I think you can go there and shake babies and kiss hands. I think that yep. But if it's more like the tech conference and there's this guru that I'm supposed to listen to. And by the way, I'm selling tickets for everyone to listen to it. I don't want to sound like, but can't you get to the people you want to listen to in other ways? Like a one-on-one conversation typically is more valuable.
Yeah. But there's a point to it. As usually in the evenings in these events, there is some not breakout rooms, but there are some like closed meetups that people would participate in. So that's a good thing, right? So you can organize your own really as well. Just using it as an opportunity, as there's like lots of people that you probably want to speak to there. So actually, events where founders were organizing this kind of meetups in the evening or afternoon. They were inviting customers. I think from the founders and startups point of view, it's a great opportunity. From my point of view, probably not as great.
Here's a type of event that I will never get. So. Every of my portfolio companies comes to the same is at the same starting point at the initial, when they basically hear it the first time or get the opportunity, and they always land in the same place, and that is VC dinners. So I don't know if you're familiar with this tactic. So VCs like to organize, especially junior people in VCs, by the way, like to organize dinners in a specific city where they invite startups that they actually know nothing about. Just, from hearsay we heard that is a cool company, right? So talk about level of depth of thinking. And because of that, they say, hey, you know what? I'm doing this event. It's very exclusive, just 15 people, 15 founders, and I want to invite you. I mean, normally I would ask myself, why do you invite me? You've never met me, or you've never seen a slide deck of me, or, but whatever. But
Yeah,
okay.
I'm sure they would regret it after.
And so you feel flattered, right? So you feel flattered and sure. And if I haven't done it before, why don't I try it out? Fair enough, right? And so my founders all go through the same experience before they have done it for the first time, and they always land in the same spot. Afterwards, I get hate rants in my WhatsApps saying, my God, this was the most terrible experience. There was absolutely no depth in this. Everybody was just posturing. There was no discussion that would have helped me building my business better. This was just cookie eating and coffee drinking or wine drinking.
Yeah.
All of them that I like, in the end, come to the conclusion, waste of time, I'm not doing it anymore.
Yeah.
So if you think events, I mean, would you want to go to events where you can have high quality one-on-one conversations with depth? For me, that would be an event that is worth considering.
Yeah, but the definition of this is not an event which takes 3-4 hours. It is at least 1 or 2 days. So then you can have some space to organize these chats. And make it work.
Let me share a story of a new event that I discovered last year. So sometimes I'm a little bit of a tourist in various industries. And so I decided to go to a VC event last summer. And I was speaking to some venture capitalists there, and they were telling me that they had just got back from their LPGP retreat. And I thought, holy shit, that didn't leave too much to the imagination, I have to say. This is like a yoga and Buddhist style of occurrences. Or maybe an ayahuasca retreat. I don't know.
I have no experience with these either.
Damn, I thought you was going to say, you're a regular. You called me Owen. These are the ones I go to.
Nope, we don't do them.
Nice. Have you guys had enough?
Yeah. And anything else we have on the agenda for today? No? Okay.
So what is this super secret WhatsApp group that Mike referenced?
You're not in there? Wow.
How do I get in?
I will send you a subscription link.
I'll tell you how you can get in.
All right.
All
Ready?
right then.
All right, guys. See you next week.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.